A very warm welcome to our grade 9 learners to your life orientation lesson for today. Now, boys and girls, today we'll be focusing on page 1 as well as page 2 and finally page 3 of your life orientation resource pack booklet number 2. Now, boys and girls, in the previous lesson, you were required to complete activity 1 found on page 1 of your life orientation resource booklet number 2, as well as page 2 of your life orientation resource booklet number 2. And you're required to complete activity 1 and activity 2. Now, activity 1 requires you to match the word or phrase in column A with the correct word or phrase in column B. And an example had been provided for you. Question 1.1, FET. FET will be number B, further education and training. 1.2, procedural, will be A, which will follow steps to achieve something. 1.3, compulsory subjects in the FET phase would be D, which are English, Afrikaans or isiZulu, Maths or Maths literacy, and life orientation, the subject or learning area rather, which you are currently having your lesson. 1.4, dynamic, would be E, which refers to changing all the time, changes that take place in the workplace all the time. For example, the evolution of technology. And 1.5, job shadow, would obviously be C, watching someone do their job. Moving on to activity 2, which required you to read through the job advertisement below and answer the questions that follow. And the job title would be an accounting clerk position available. The advertisement also provides you with some general details such as the location of where the job will be, who has advertised the job type, be it full-time or part-time or casual, a description of what the job entails, the requirements of the job position, as well as the salary for the person who ends up getting the job, as well as the place to which the applicant's CV should be emailed to. So moving on to the questions. 2.1 asks you to identify the type of job being advertised. So when we go back to page 1 of our second life orientation resource booklet, the answer will be an accounting clerk. 2.2 would require you to describe 2 requirements for the job mentioned in question 2.1. And you would find that the requirements would be that the applicant should have a matric with accounting and maths and should be proficient in Microsoft Excel. 2.3 requires you to list 2 specialized subjects that need to be done at school in order to study for a degree in the accounting field. And as the advertisement states that accounting and maths are fundamental subjects that will be done at school in order to pursue the position and to apply for this job of an accounting clerk. 2.4 requires you to identify 2 core subjects that are needed to be done at school for the following job types. The first one being a tour guide. A tour guide would require tourism and history to be done at school. A mechanical engineer for question 2.4.2 would require physical science and pure maths to be done in school. A computer programmer would require IT, also known as information technology, as well as pure maths, or computer applications and technology, also known as CAT, as well as maths lit. A doctor would require physical science and life science to be done at school, which goes hand in hand with pure maths. And a lawyer would require history and one of the other compulsory subjects such as English, as well as pure maths, which need to be done in school. And they would also need to be very proficient in English when fighting a court case. 2.5 requires you to identify 2 places that we can visit to find out more information regarding careers. Places such as your library, your school, also your allo educator who works at school, such as I am Mr. Essie or Mrs. Essie Smart, as well as the internet, and even, if need be, even visit a tertiary institution to find out about the requirements for that particular career field. Moving on to question 2.6, which requires you to imagine that your parent or caregiver is unable to pay for your studies after you have matriculated, and you have to describe one way in which you would go about paying for your studies. Well, boys and girls, this question refers to how would you pay for your studies or fund your studies if your parents were not able to pay for your studies after you have matriculated. Possible ways would be a bursary, a student loan application, applying for a scholarship, or even working part-time and saving, or even paying towards your studies. Now, boys and girls, moving on to our next section for today's lesson, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, Act 75 of 1997. To begin, we will start exploring this act with the basic purpose of this act. The purpose of this act is to ensure fair labor practices between employer and employee, and also which will thereby assist in enhancing economic development and social justice by establishing and enforcing the basic conditions of employment. Moving on to the third page of your second life orientation resource pack. The basic conditions of employment also stipulates the hour of work for an employee. It states that a worker must not work for more than 45 hours a week, or 9 hours a day, or they work for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, which is inclusive of meal breaks, which we will get to just now. If a worker works overtime, a worker is to be paid 1.5 times their hourly rate for each hour of overtime worked, and must be paid double their daily rate if working on Sundays or public holidays. With regards to meal breaks and rest periods, it states that employees are entitled to a 15-minute tea break and a 1-hour lunch break unless otherwise stipulated in their contract. With regards to leave taking, firstly, sick leave. Yes, we are all bound to get sick during the course of the year, boys and girls, as an employee. And it states that an employee can take up to 36 days of sick leave within a 3-year cycle. And if an employee is absent for 2 or more days from work, then a doctor's note will be required to be produced to the employer when the employee returns back to work. Annual leave states that a worker can take up to 21 consecutive days or annual leave or by agreement, 1 day for every 17 days worked, and the leave must not be taken later than 6 months after the end of the leave cycle. Maternity leave is applicable to pregnant female employees, which states that a female employee is entitled to 4 to 6 consecutive months of maternity leave once a baby is born. The employee is also entitled to leave work at least 4 weeks before the expected date of birth and can only return back to work once her doctor or midwife declares her fit to do so. With regards to termination of employment, a worker or employer must give notice to end an employment contract of not less than 1 week if the employee is employed for 4 weeks or less, 2 weeks if the employee is employed for more than 4 weeks but less than a year, and 4 weeks notice if an employee is employed for a year or longer. Now, boys and girls, moving on to our next activity, which I'd like you to complete for the week ahead, is activity 3, which is found on page 3 of your second life orientation resource pack. Activity 3 requires you to write an essay in which you discuss the following aspects of the Basic Condition of Employment Act. It's also important to know that your essay should not exceed 1 page and should focus on the following areas, such as the purpose of the Act, meal breaks, hours of work, overtime worked, as well as the taking of sick leave. And this information can be found from the bottom of page 2 of your resource pack and on page 3 of your resource pack. With that being said, boys and girls, I wish you all the best with completing activity 3, which requires you to write an essay to discuss the following aspects of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Do stay safe and take care.